The bullet whistled past Ethan Sullivan's ear so close he felt the heat of it. And in that split second before he dove behind the water trough, he realized the one person he'd trusted had just tried to kill him. Dust exploded around him as two more shots splintered the wooden planks at his back. Independence. Missouri had seemed like a fresh start when he'd ridden in 3 weeks ago. Another nameless town where a man could disappear and reinvent himself. But Marcus Hartley, the supposed friend who'd vouched for him at the Silver Star Saloon, stood across the muddy street with a smoking revolver and cold murder in his eyes. "You should have kept your mouth shut, Sullivan," Marcus shouted, his voice carrying over the afternoon commotion. Townspeople scattered like startled chickens, Chinese letter FRONTS slamming shut as decent folks sought cover. Mr. Donovan don't take kindly to folks nosing into his business. Ethan's hand went to his own gun, but his holster was empty. He'd left his Colt at the boarding house, foolishly thinking he was among friends when Marcus had suggested they take a walk. The betrayal burned worse than any bullet wound. For 2 years since the war ended in 1867, Ethan had drifted from town to town, unable to trust anyone, unable to put down roots. The one time he'd let his guard down, this happened. He needed to move. The water trough provided minimal cover and Marcus wasn't alone. 2 more men emerged from the alley beside the general store, both armed, both wearing the same hard expressions of hired guns. Ethan recognized them as Donovan's men, the cattle baron who seemed to own half of Jackson County and wanted the other half. The nearest cover was the livery stable 30 yards away. Ethan took a breath, measured the distance, and ran. Bullets kicked up dirt at his heels. His lungs burned as he pushed his legs harder, zigzagging across the open ground. 20 yards. 15. A shot grazed his shoulder, tearing through his shirt and drawing blood, but he kept running. 10 yards. 5. He crashed through the stable doors and rolled behind a hay bale, finally allowing himself to gulp air. His shoulder throbbed, but the wound was superficial. The stable was dim and smelled of horses and leather and blessedly empty except for the animals in their stalls. "Come out, Sullivan," Marcus called from outside. "Make it easy on yourself. Mr. Donovan just wants to talk." Ethan almost laughed at that. Men didn't send 3 armed gunmen when they just wanted to talk. He'd stumbled onto something 3 days ago, overheard a conversation he shouldn't have while walking past Donovan's ranch house. Something about forged deeds and a plan to run off the remaining independent farmers in the territory. Ethan had mentioned it to Marcus, thinking he was confiding in a friend, biggest mistake of his life. He scanned the stable for anything he could use as a weapon. A pitchfork leaned against a stall and various pieces of tack hung on the walls. Not much against 3 armed men. His best bet was the back door that led to the corral, then the open prairie beyond. "I count to 10, then we're coming in," Marcus shouted. Ethan moved low and fast through the stable, keeping the stalls between him and the front doors. The horses whinnied nervously, sensing danger. He reached the back door and eased it open, wincing at the creak of hinges. The corral was empty, but beyond it stretched 30 yards of open ground before the town gave way to rolling grassland. If he could make those trees along the creek, he might have a chance. He heard the front stable doors bang open behind him. No more time. Ethan ran. The shouts erupted immediately, followed by gunfire. A bullet struck the fence post beside him, sending splinters flying. Another punched through the corral rail. He vaulted the fence without slowing, his boots hitting the hard, packed earth on the other side, 20 yards to the tree line. His shoulder screamed with each pump of his arms. 15 yards. He could hear boots pounding behind him, closing the distance. 10 yards. A figure appeared from behind a large oak, and Ethan's heart sank. They'd cut off his escape. But as he prepared to change direction, the figure raised a rifle and fired past him. One of his pursuers cried out and fell. The other two dove for cover. "Get down," a woman's voice commanded, and Ethan dropped flat as she fired twice more, her shots precise and purposeful, keeping the gunmen pinned. "Behind the tree," she ordered, and Ethan scrambled to obey, his mind reeling. He pressed his back against the oak's broad trunk, breathing hard, and finally got a look at his unlikely savior. She was younger than he'd expected from the authority in her voice, probably around 23 or 24 to his 26 years. Dark auburn hair was pulled back in a practical braid, and her dress was simple calico, dusty from travel. But it was her eyes that struck him, a piercing green that held no fear despite the danger, only a fierce determination. "Who are you?" she demanded, not taking her eyes off the stable where Marcus and his remaining companion had taken cover. "Ethan Sullivan. And I'm mighty grateful for the help, miss, but who are you, Julia Winters?" She fired again, her shot striking the stable wall inches from where Marcus's head had appeared. "And those men work for Andrew Donovan. You know them," her jaw tightened. "I know Donovan. He killed my father." Before Ethan could respond, she was moving, using the trees for cover as she worked her way toward better position. He followed, unarmed and feeling useless. She handled the rifle like she'd been born with it, each movement confident and controlled. "Your father?" he asked when they paused behind a thick cottonwood. "6 months ago." Julia's voice was steady, but Ethan heard the pain underneath. "Donovan wanted our land. Father wouldn't sell. They made it look like an accident, a fall from his horse, but I found boot prints where someone had strung wire across the trail. By the time I could prove anything, the sheriff had already ruled it accidental death. The sheriff's in Donovan's pocket." Julia gave him a look that said he was slow on the uptake. "The sheriff, the judge, half the town council. Donovan owns this county in everything but name." More pieces fell into place for Ethan. The conversation he'd overheard, the forged deeds, the systematic acquisition of land. "He's building an empire and eliminating anyone who stands in his way." Julia checked her ammunition. "Why's he after you?" "I overheard something I shouldn't have. Made the mistake of trusting the wrong person." She glanced at him then, really looked at him, and something passed between them, a recognition of shared pain. "Trust is a dangerous thing out here. Seems like it." A shout from the stable interrupted them. "Sullivan, we got the place surrounded. Give up and maybe Donovan goes easy on you." "He's lying," Julia said quietly. "Donovan doesn't go easy on anyone." Ethan knew she was right. He'd seen what happened to people who crossed powerful men. The war had taught him that lesson in blood and fire. "What do you suggest? Can you ride?" "Yes." "Then we run. My horse is tethered 50 yards that way." She pointed deeper into the trees. "We get to her, we head for the hill country. I know places Donovan's men won't follow." "Why are you helping me?" Julia met his eyes, and for the first time, he saw past the determination to the loneliness underneath, a mirror of his own. "Because Donovan's men are my enemies too, and because I'm tired of fighting alone." The honesty in her words struck something deep in Ethan's chest. Here was someone who understood, who'd been betrayed and hurt and was still standing, still fighting. In that moment, looking into Julia Winters's fierce green eyes, he felt the first stirring of something he'd thought dead since the war, since the long trail of disappointments and betrayals that had brought him to independence. Hope. "All right," he said. "Let's go." They moved through the trees, Julia providing covering fire whenever Marcus or his companion showed themselves. The afternoon sun slanted through the leaves, casting dappled shadows that helped conceal their retreat. Ethan's shoulder burned, but adrenaline kept him moving. Julia's horse was a sturdy bay mare, saddled and ready. Julia swung up first, then extended her hand to Ethan. He took it, feeling the calluses on her palm, the strength in her grip as she helped pull him up behind her. "Hold on," she said, and kicked the mare into motion. They crashed through the underbrush, Julia guiding the horse with expert skill around trees and over fallen logs. Behind them, shouts and gunfire faded as they put distance between themselves and independence. The mare was strong and sure-footed, and Julia rode like someone born to the saddle. Ethan held on, acutely aware of how close they were, his arms around her waist, the scent of her hair, soap and sunshine, and something uniquely her. His heart pounded, and not just from the escape. They rode for an hour, following the creek upstream into rougher country. The rolling grasslands gave way to broken hills thick with oak and hickory. Julia seemed to know every turn, every game trail. Finally, as the sun touched the western horizon, she slowed the mare to a walk and guided her into a narrow ravine. "There's a cave up ahead," she said over her shoulder. "We can hide there tonight." The cave was more of an overhang, a shelf of limestone that created a shallow shelter maybe 15 feet deep. A fire ring suggested Julia had used it before. She dismounted and led the mare to a small spring that bubbled from the rocks. Ethan slid down, his legs unsteady after the ride. Now that the immediate danger had passed, the pain in his shoulder demanded attention. He touched it gingerly and his fingers came away bloody. "Let me see," Julia said, tying the mare's reins to a sturdy bush. She set down her rifle and approached him with a directness that was becoming familiar. "Sit down." He sat on a flat rock while she examined the wound, her touch surprisingly gentle. "The bullet just grazed you. You're lucky." "Lucky seems like a strong word for a day where 3 men tried to kill me." A ghost of a smile touched her lips. "Fair point." She pulled a kerchief from her pocket and cleaned the wound as best she could. "It'll need proper bandaging, but this will do for now." "Thank you." Ethan watched her work, studying her face in the fading light. She had freckles across her nose and a small scar on her chin. "For everything. You saved my life back there." Julia tied off the makeshift bandage and sat back. "Don't thank me yet. Donovan won't stop looking for you or me." "You think he knows you're the one who helped me?" "Probably. I haven't exactly been subtle about investigating my father's death." She pulled her knees up and wrapped her arms around them, suddenly looking younger and more vulnerable. "The truth is, I've been gathering evidence for months, trying to find something concrete enough to take to the federal marshal in Kansas City. But it's slow going and dangerous." "What kind of evidence?" "Documents, mostly. Correspondence between Donovan and various officials. A few people willing to testify, though they're terrified. Donovan's been buying up land all over the county, but at least 5 of those purchases involved suspicious deaths or sudden departures." She looked at him. "What did you hear?" Ethan told her about the conversation, about the forged deeds and the plan to systematically eliminate the independent farmers who wouldn't sell. As he spoke, Julia's expression grew darker. "That's it," she said when he finished. "That's what I've been missing. If we can prove the deeds are forged, the whole thing falls apart." "How do we do that?" "The original deeds are filed at the county courthouse, but Donovan keeps his copies in a safe at his ranch house." She met his eyes. "I've been watching the place for weeks, learning the guards' patterns. With 2 of us, we might actually be able to get inside." Ethan stared at her. "You want to rob Andrew Donovan. I want to expose him for the murderer and thief he is." Fire lit her eyes. "But yes, that requires getting the forged deeds from his safe." It was insane. Suicidal even. Donovan's ranch was a fortress. and the man himself was known to be ruthless. But as Ethan looked at Julia, saw the determination and pain and desperate hope in her face, he realized she was going to try it with or without him. And something in him couldn't bear the thought of her facing that danger alone. More than that, he realized he wanted to help her, wanted to be the person she could count on the way no one had been there for him. "All right," he heard himself say. "Tell me your plan." Relief and something else, something warmer, flashed across Julia's face. "Really, really. But let's be smart about it. When's the best time to break in?" They talked late into the night, Julia sketching the ranch layout in the dirt with a stick, pointing out guard positions and possible entry points. Ethan asked questions, suggested modifications, and gradually a workable plan took shape. As they worked, Ethan found himself increasingly impressed by Julia's intelligence and thoroughness. She'd done her homework, watched and learned and prepared. She wasn't reckless, just desperate and determined, and brave, incredibly brave. Finally, when the moon was high and they'd exhausted the planning, Julia built a small fire and heated some coffee and beans she'd brought in her saddlebags. They ate in companionable silence, the weight of what they were planning settling over them. "Can I ask you something?" Julia said eventually, her voice soft in the darkness. "Sure." "Before, you said you trusted the wrong person." "Marcus?" Ethan nodded, staring into the fire. "We served together during the war, saved each other's lives more than once. When I ran into him here in Independence, I thought maybe I'd finally found someone who understood." "What happened to you?" The question was gentle, without judgment, and maybe that's why Ethan found himself answering. "The war happened. Then when I tried to go home, I found out my father had died while I was gone and the bank had taken our farm. I drifted for a while, tried to settle down a few times, but—" He shrugged. "Every time I trusted someone, every time I let myself believe things could be different, something went wrong. People lie, they betray you, they leave." Julia was quiet for a long moment. "My mother left when I was 12, she said finally. Just packed a bag one day and headed east. Said she couldn't take the frontier life anymore, needed civilization. Asked me to come with her." She poked at the fire with a stick. "I chose to stay with my father. We built that farm together, made it into something, and then Donovan took it all away. I'm sorry." "Me too." She looked at him across the fire. "But maybe we can take something back. Maybe we can stop him from doing it to anyone else." "And then what?" "What do you mean?" Ethan leaned forward. "Say we get the evidence, say we bring Donovan down. What happens to you?" Julia's expression grew distant. "I get my father's farm back, I suppose. Try to make it work alone." "Alone?" She met his eyes. "I don't have anyone else. My father was all I had." The loneliness in her voice echoed his own so perfectly it hurt. Here they were, two people who'd lost everything, who'd been betrayed and abandoned and forced to rely only on themselves. Two people who desperately needed someone to trust, someone to believe in, but were too scarred to risk it. Except they were risking it now, weren't they? Planning a dangerous raid together, trusting each other with their lives. Ethan wasn't sure when he'd made the decision to trust Julia, but sitting there in the firelight, he realized he did. Completely. "You're not alone anymore," he said quietly. "Whatever happens, however this goes, you've got me." Julia's eyes glistened. "You don't even know me. I know you're brave, I know you're smart and capable. I know you loved your father enough to risk everything to get him justice." He paused. "And I know you saved my life today when you could have just stayed hidden and let Donovan's men kill me. That tells me everything I need to know." A tear tracked down Julia's cheek, and she wiped it away impatiently. "You needed help, and you gave it. That takes someone special." Ethan moved around the fire to sit beside her. "I spent 2 years convinced I couldn't trust anyone, but Julia, I trust you. I don't know why exactly, but I do." She turned to face him, and in the firelight her eyes were impossibly green and vulnerable. "I want to believe people can be good, can be honest, but I've seen so much corruption, so much cruelty. Donovan killing my father, the sheriff looking the other way, friends who disappeared rather than testify." Her voice broke slightly. "I want to believe there are still people worth believing in." Ethan reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away, and took her hand. "Then believe in me, and I'll believe in you. We'll figure the rest out together." Julia's fingers tightened around his. Together. They sat like that for a long time, hands clasped, watching the fire burn down. Something had shifted between them, a foundation being laid. Trust was a fragile thing, easily broken, but in that moment Ethan felt it settling into his bones. He would protect this woman. He would stand with her. And somehow, impossibly, he knew she felt the same. Eventually, they made sleeping arrangements, Julia taking the deeper part of the cave while Ethan kept watch near the entrance with her rifle. But before she settled in, she squeezed his hand one more time. "Thank you," she whispered, "for believing in me." "Thank you for giving me someone to believe in," he replied. The next morning dawned clear and cool, October air carrying the promise of coming winter. Ethan woke to find Julia already up, checking the mare and organizing their supplies with the efficiency of someone used to taking care of herself. "Morning," she said, offering him a canteen of water. "How's your shoulder?" He rotated it experimentally. "Sore but functional. When do we do this?" "Tonight. Donovan throws a party every month for the important people in the county. Most of his guards will be busy with that, and he'll be distracted playing the generous host." Julia's tone made clear what she thought of Donovan's hospitality. "It's our best chance." They spent the day preparing, checking equipment, and going over the plan repeatedly until they could both recite it in their sleep. As the afternoon wore on, Ethan found himself watching Julia more than he probably should. The way she moved, confident and precise. The way she bit her lower lip when she was thinking. The way the sunlight caught red highlights in her dark hair. She caught him staring once and raised an eyebrow. "What?" "Nothing," Ethan said, feeling heat creep up his neck. "Just thinking you're pretty remarkable." Color touched her cheeks. "I'm just doing what needs to be done. Most people wouldn't. Most people would have run after their father died, started over somewhere else." "I thought about it," Julia admitted. She sat down on a rock and Ethan joined her. "Right after it happened, I wanted to leave to get as far from independence as possible. But then I realized that's exactly what Donovan wanted. He wanted me scared and broken and gone." Her jaw set. "So I stayed, and I fought back the only way I knew how. By gathering evidence. By refusing to disappear." She looked at him. "What about you? Why'd you come to independence?" Ethan shrugged. "Seemed like a place where a man could start fresh. I'd heard they were hiring ranch hands, and I thought maybe I could save enough to buy a little piece of land eventually, build something." He gave a bitter laugh. "Should have known better." "Known what?" "That fresh starts are a lie. The past follows you wherever you go." Julia was quiet for a moment, then said softly, "Maybe it's not about escaping the past. Maybe it's about finding someone to face it with." Her words hit Ethan square in the chest. He turned to look at her, really look at her, and saw the same longing he felt reflected in her eyes. The desire to not be alone anymore. The desperate hope that maybe, just maybe, this person could be trusted. "Julia," he started, not even sure what he wanted to say, just knowing he needed to say something. She waited, her eyes on his face, open and honest and so achingly vulnerable it made his heart hurt. "I know we just met," Ethan continued, the words coming from somewhere deep inside. "And I know this probably isn't the time. But I need you to know that whatever happens tonight, you've already changed something for me. You've made me want to believe again, want to trust again. Ethan. His name was barely a whisper. I'm not saying I'm good at this. God knows I've got more scars than sense, and I don't have anything to offer you but a wanted man's promise. But after tonight, if we both make it through this, I'd like to try. To be the person you can count on. To build something together, something good. Julia's eyes were bright with unshed tears. You're offering me a future when we don't even know if we'll survive the night. I guess I am. Stupid, probably. No. She reached out and touched his face, her palm warm against his cheek. No, it's brave and hopeful, and I want that too, so much. Ethan covered her hand with his own. Then we have something to fight for, something to come back for. Together, she said again, the word becoming a promise between them. He leaned in slowly, giving her every chance to pull away, but she didn't. Her eyes fluttered closed as his lips met hers, gentle and sweet and full of unspoken promises. The kiss was brief, just a moment, but it sealed something between them that was deeper than words. When they pulled apart, Julia smiled for the first time since he'd met her, a real smile that lit up her whole face. We better survive tonight now. I have plans for you, Ethan Sullivan, he grinned back. Is that so? That's so. She stood and pulled him up with her. Come on. We have a ranch to rob. As the sun set, they rode toward Donovan's ranch, keeping to the tree line and avoiding the main road. Julia's knowledge of the area proved invaluable, guiding them along paths that kept them hidden from view. The ranch came into view as full darkness fell. It was impressive, Ethan had to admit, a sprawling complex of buildings centered around a large main house. Light blazed from every window, and the sound of music and laughter drifted across the night. Donovan's party was in full swing. They tethered the mare in a small copse of trees a quarter-mile from the house and continued on foot. Julia had changed into dark trousers and a shirt, practical for breaking and entering. Ethan had to admit it suited her. The safe is in Donovan's study on the second floor, Julia whispered as they crept closer. There's a servant's entrance at the back. If we time it right with the guard's rotation, we can slip in while he's checking the front of the house. They waited in the shadows, watching the guard pace his circuit. Julia counted under her breath, timing his movements. When he rounded the corner toward the front, she grabbed Ethan's hand and they ran. The back door was unlocked, as Julia had predicted. Servants were rushing back and forth serving the party, too busy to notice two more people in dark clothes moving through the kitchen. They slipped into a back hallway and made for the servants' stairs. The second floor was quieter, most of the noise concentrated downstairs where the party was. Julia led them down a richly carpeted hallway to a heavy oak door. This is it, she breathed. Ethan tried the handle. Locked. He pulled two thin pieces of metal from his pocket, tools he'd learned to use during the war when necessary, and worked the lock. It took 30 agonizing seconds, but finally he felt the mechanism give. The study was dark, lit only by moonlight through the windows. Ethan eased inside, Julia right behind him. The safe was exactly where she'd said it would be, set into the wall behind a painting of horses. Can you open it? Julia whispered. I can try. Ethan knelt before the safe, pressing his ear against the metal as he slowly turned the dial. The technique was one an old safecracker in his unit had taught him, listening for the subtle clicks of the tumblers falling into place. Time seemed to slow as he worked. Every sound from the hallway made his heart jump, expecting discovery at any moment. Julia kept watch by the door, tense as a coiled spring. Click. The first tumbler fell. Sweat beaded on Ethan's forehead despite the cool night air. He continued turning, feeling for the next one. Click. The second tumbler. Hurry, Julia whispered urgently. Someone's coming up the stairs. Ethan forced himself to stay calm to keep his movements slow and steady. Rush now and he'd have to start over. Click. The third tumbler, footsteps in the hallway getting closer. Julia pressed herself against the wall beside the door, ready to slam it shut if necessary. Ethan turned the handle and the safe swung open. Inside were stacks of papers, cash, and a leather journal. He grabbed the journal and rifled through it quickly. Names, dates, payments to the sheriff and judge, and most importantly, notes about the forged deeds and who had been paid to look the other way. Got it, he breathed. Then let's go. They slipped out of the study just as the footsteps reached the other end of the hallway. A servant carrying fresh linens. She glanced their way but kept walking, apparently too focused on her task to question their presence. Back down the servant's stairs, through the kitchen where chaos still reigned, out the back door into the blessed darkness. They didn't speak, didn't slow, just ran for the trees where they'd left the mare. They'd almost made it when a shout went up behind them. Someone's been in the study. The safe's open. Go, go, Ethan urged, and they ran faster, more shouts, the sound of men mounting horses. Within seconds, the hunt would be on. They reached the mare and swung up together, Ethan clutching the journal to his chest while Julia kicked the horse into a gallop. Behind them, torches flared to life and a group of riders poured from the ranch, heading in their direction. They're coming. Ethan shouted over the pounding hooves. I know a place. Julia leaned low over the mare's neck, urging her faster. Trust me, and Ethan did, completely. As they raced through the darkness, pursued by Donovan's men, he trusted Julia to get them to safety the same way she'd trusted him to open the safe. They were in this together. Julia guided them through a maze of hills and gullies, taking turns that seemed random but clearly weren't. She knew this country like the back of her hand. Gradually, the sounds of pursuit faded as they lost their followers in the broken terrain. Finally, when the mare was lathered and breathing hard, Julia slowed to a walk and guided them into a narrow canyon. At its end, hidden behind a screen of brush, was an old trapper's cabin. My father and I used to come hunting here, Julia explained, dismounting. No one else knows about it. They led the mare inside the cabin, not wanting to risk her being spotted outside, then collapsed against the wall, breathing hard. We did it, Julia said and started laughing. We actually did it, Ethan grinned, caught up in her joy and relief. You were amazing. The way you lost those riders. You opened the safe. I thought we were caught for sure when that servant came by. They were both laughing now, the tension and fear of the past hours releasing in a flood of giddy relief. Ethan opened the journal and tilted it toward the moonlight streaming through the cabin's one window. Julia, this is everything. Names, dates, the forged deeds, payments to officials. It's enough to bring down Donovan and half the county government. She moved close to look, and suddenly they were very aware of each other. The laughter faded, replaced by something warmer and more intense. We make a good team, Julia said softly. The best. Ethan set the journal aside carefully. Julia, what I said earlier about wanting to try, about building something together, I meant it. I know you did, and I meant it when I said I wanted that too. She took his hands in hers. Ethan, I've been alone for so long. Afraid to trust anyone, afraid to hope for anything beyond surviving the next day. But with you, I feel different. I feel like maybe there's a future worth fighting for. There is, with me, with us. He pulled her closer. I know we're still getting to know each other. I know we've got a long road ahead, bringing Donovan to justice, figuring out what comes next. But Julia, I'm all in. Whatever you need, wherever you want to go, I'm with you. Tears spilled down her cheeks, but she was smiling. You needed someone to trust, and I found you. He wiped the tears away gently with his thumb. You needed someone to believe in, and I found you. She wrapped her arms around his neck, Together we found both. When they kissed this time, it wasn't gentle or tentative. It was full of promise and passion, of relief and joy and the desperate need to hold onto this moment. This person, this chance at happiness they'd both thought was lost to them forever. They held each other as the moon tracked across the sky, talking and kissing and making plans. They would take the journal to the federal marshal in Kansas City. They would testify against Donovan and the corrupt officials. They would get Julia's father's farm back and make it work together. "What do you know about farming?" Julia asked at one point, her head resting on Ethan's shoulder. "Grew up on a farm before the war, corn mostly and some cattle. You?" "My father raised horses, good ones. I'd like to continue that, build a breeding program." She tilted her head to look up at him. "Think we could make it work, horse farm and some crops, with you?" "I think we could make anything work." She smiled and kissed him again. "I love how you believe in us, in me. How could I not? You're the strongest person I've ever met." He stroked her hair, marveling at how right this felt, how natural. "I never thought I'd find this. Someone who understands, who's been through their own fires and came out stronger." "We're both broken," Julia said quietly, "but maybe together we can be whole. We will be. I promise you, Julia, we will be." They stayed in the cabin for 2 days, lying low while Donovan's men searched for them. On the third day, they made their way carefully to Kansas City, keeping off the main roads and traveling mostly at night. The federal marshal was a stern man named Chapman who listened to their story with an increasingly dark expression. When Ethan handed over the journal, Chapman's eyes widened. "This is dynamite," he said, flipping through the pages. "If even half of this is true, Donovan and his people are looking at serious prison time." "It's all true," Julia said firmly, "and I can prove it. I have witnesses willing to testify now that they know someone's actually listening." Chapman nodded slowly. "All right. I'll need you both to stay in Kansas City for a few weeks while we build the case. Can you do that?" They looked at each other and nodded. "We can do that," Ethan said. The next month was a whirlwind. The marshal's office moved quickly, bringing in witnesses, comparing the journal's information with county records, building an airtight case against Donovan and his co-conspirators. True to her word, Julia produced several people willing to testify, farmers and townspeople who'd been too frightened to speak up before. Ethan and Julia stayed in a modest boarding house in Kansas City, registered as Mr. and Mrs. Sullivan. It was a fiction that felt more real with each passing day. They fell into an easy domestic rhythm, taking meals together, walking in the evenings, planning their future. "When this is over," Ethan said one night as they sat on a bench by the Missouri River, "I want to marry you. For real, not just for appearances." Julia turned to him, her eyes shining. "Is that a proposal, Mr. Sullivan?" "It is if you're saying yes, Miss Winters." She laughed, that full, joyous laugh he'd come to love. "Then yes, 1,000 times yes." He pulled her into his arms and kissed her thoroughly, not caring who might see. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Julia said, "I never imagined I could be this happy. After my father died, I thought joy was something that happened to other people, but you've given it back to me. You've done the same for me, more than you know." Ethan rested his forehead against hers. "2 months ago I had nothing. No home, no future, no one to trust. Now I have everything. I have you. Always," Julia promised. "You'll always have me." The trial began in late November. Donovan and 12 other men, including the sheriff and a county judge, faced charges ranging from fraud to murder. The courtroom was packed every day, townspeople from Independence and beyond coming to watch justice finally being served. Julia testified on the third day, speaking clearly and calmly about her father's death, the evidence she'd found, and the months of investigation that had led her to Ethan and the journal. When Donovan's lawyer tried to shake her testimony, she met his attacks with steady resolve, never wavering. Ethan testified next, describing what he'd overheard and the attempt on his life. He produced the journal and walked the jury through its contents, explaining what each entry meant. The defense tried to claim the journal was forged, but handwriting experts confirmed it was genuinely Donovan's writing. They tried to discredit the witnesses, but there were too many of them, their stories too consistent. After 2 weeks of testimony, the jury deliberated for 6 hours before returning guilty verdicts on all major charges. Donovan received 20 years in prison. The corrupt sheriff and judge received 15 years each. The remaining conspirators got sentences ranging from 5 to 10 years. When the verdicts were read, Julia grabbed Ethan's hand and squeezed so hard it hurt. They'd done it. Together they'd brought down Donovan and his empire. Afterwards, outside the courthouse, Marshal Chapman approached them. "I want to thank you both. What you did was brave and made a real difference. Those men would still be terrorizing Jackson County if not for you." "Thank you for listening," Julia said, "for taking us seriously." Chapman tipped his hat. "Just doing my job. What will you do now?" Julia and Ethan exchanged glances. "Go home," Ethan said. "Build a life. You've earned it. Good luck to you both." They returned to Independence in early December. The town felt different now, lighter somehow. With Donovan gone and his corrupt officials removed from power, people moved more freely, smiled more readily. Several farmers whose land had been stolen had it returned by court order, including Julia's father's farm. Walking onto the property for the first time, Julia's eyes filled with tears. "It's still here, all of it. The house, the barn, the corrals." "It's home," Ethan said, wrapping his arm around her. "Our home if you'll have me." She turned into his embrace. "Forever." They were married on Christmas Eve in Independence's small church. It was a simple ceremony, but half the town turned out, grateful to the couple who'd freed them from Donovan's tyranny. Marcus Hartley was conspicuously absent, having left town the day Donovan was arrested. Good riddance, Ethan thought. Julia wore a simple white dress she'd sewn herself, and Ethan wore his best shirt and trousers. When the preacher pronounced them husband and wife, Ethan kissed his bride thoroughly, earning applause and a few good-natured whistles from the congregation. The winter passed in a blur of hard work and deep happiness. They repaired the barn, ordered new breeding stock, and planted winter wheat. Ethan proved to be every bit the capable farmer Julia had hoped, and she taught him everything she knew about horses. At night, in their warm bed, they held each other and talked about the future. Children they wanted, the breeding program they'd build, the life they were creating together from the ashes of their separate losses. "I used to think I was cursed," Ethan admitted one February night Julia curled against his side, "that I'd never have anything good, never be able to trust anyone. And now," Julia's fingers traced patterns on his chest, "now I know I was just waiting for the right person. For you." He kissed the top of her head. "You're my miracle, Julia Sullivan, and you're mine." She propped herself up to look at him. "You know what I realized today?" "What?" "That I'm not angry anymore. For months after my father died, I was consumed by rage at Donovan, at the injustice, at the world. But bringing him to justice, building this life with you, it's healed something in me." She touched his face gently. "You've healed me." Ethan pulled her down for a kiss. "We healed each other." Spring came, and with it new life. Their first foal was born in April, a strong colt with good lines. Julia was beside herself with joy, staying up all night with the mare during the delivery, Ethan by her side the whole time. "He's perfect," she breathed, watching the colt struggle to his feet on wobbly legs. "Look at him, Ethan. This is the start of everything we dreamed about. Ethan wrapped his arms around her from behind, his chin on her shoulder. It's all coming together. The farm, the horses, us. She leaned back into him. I'm so happy I can barely stand it. Is it always going to feel like this? If I have anything to say about it, yes. In May, Julia realized she was pregnant. She told Ethan over breakfast, watching his face carefully, suddenly nervous despite everything they'd talked about. Are you sure? He asked, his voice strangely hoarse. Pretty sure. Morning sickness for a week now, and I'm late. Ethan stood up so fast his chair fell over. He came around the table and swept Julia into his arms, spinning her around. We're having a baby, Julia laughed, holding on to him. We are you happy? Happy, Julia, I'm over the moon. He set her down carefully, suddenly concerned. Should I not have spun you around? Is that bad for the baby? I'm fine, we're fine. She cupped his face in her hands. We're going to be parents, Ethan. The best parents, I promise you. Our child is going to know nothing but love and security. He kissed her softly. Thank you. For this, for everything. Thank you. For giving me a reason to believe in the future again. The pregnancy progressed smoothly. Julia continued working with the horses through her 6th month, only stopping when Ethan threatened to lock her in the house for her own safety. She grumbled about being treated like porcelain, but secretly she loved his attentiveness. On a cold January morning in 1869, after 12 hours of labor, Julia delivered a healthy baby boy. Ethan held his son for the first time with shaking hands, overwhelmed by the tiny, perfect creature in his arms. He's beautiful, he whispered, tears streaming down his face. Julia, he's so beautiful. He looks like you, Julia said from the bed, exhausted but radiant. Same eyes, same chin. We should name him Thomas, after your father. Julia's eyes filled with fresh tears. Really, really. He should know where he came from, the good man his grandfather was. Ethan carried little Thomas over to Julia. Thomas Sullivan, what do you think? I think it's perfect. She gathered her son to her chest, and Ethan sat on the edge of the bed, his arm around them both. We're a family now. The family we both needed, Ethan agreed. And we're going to fill this house with love and laughter and all the things we never had. Thomas grew quickly, a happy, curious baby who seemed to find joy in everything. Ethan proved to be a devoted father, taking Thomas out to see the horses as soon as he could hold his head up, talking to him about the farm and the land and all the things they'd do together. You're going to spoil him, Julia teased one afternoon, watching Ethan carefully hold Thomas up to pet a gentle mare. Absolutely, Ethan agreed cheerfully. That's my right as a father. Julia came to stand beside them, wrapping her arm around Ethan's waist. We're good at this. At being a family. We are. Ethan kissed her temple. You know what I was thinking about today? What? That day in Independence when Marcus and his men were chasing me. If I'd zigged instead of zagged, if I'd gone left instead of right, I might never have run toward those trees where you were waiting. He looked at her seriously. My whole life would be different. I'd probably be dead. Don't. Julia touched his face. Don't think about that. I'm not trying to be morbid. I'm just amazed at how one moment, one decision can change everything. If you hadn't been there that day, if you hadn't decided to help a stranger. He shook his head. I used to think I was unlucky. Now I know I'm the luckiest man alive. We're both lucky. I was at my lowest point, ready to do something desperate and probably get myself killed. Then you came along and gave me someone to fight with instead of alone. She stood on her toes to kiss him. We saved each other. In every way that matters, Ethan agreed. The farm prospered over the next few years. Julia's breeding program gained a reputation for producing quality horses, and buyers came from as far as Kansas City and Topeka to see her stock. Ethan proved to have a gift for breaking and training the young horses. his patience and gentle touch producing animals that were calm, intelligent, and loyal. They added onto the house, building a larger kitchen and 2 more bedrooms. "Planning ahead," Ethan said when Julia raised an eyebrow at the extra space. She proved him right when she became pregnant again in 1871, delivering a daughter they named Sarah in the spring of 1872. Then came another son, James, in 1874. The house filled with the sound of children's laughter, exactly as Ethan had promised. Thomas grew into a serious, thoughtful boy who loved the horses as much as his mother did. Sarah was fearless and determined, following her father everywhere. Little James was still young but already showing signs of being the charmer of the family. On a warm evening in June 1875, Ethan and Julia sat on the porch watching their children play in the yard. Thomas was teaching Sarah how to approach a horse properly while James toddled around collecting rocks. "Look at them," Julia said softly, leaning against Ethan's shoulder. "Sometimes I can't believe they are ours." "I know what you mean. There are moments when I wake up and think I'm dreaming." Ethan kissed her hair. 8 years since that day in Independence. 8 years of the best life I could have imagined, and it just keeps getting better. Julia took his hand. "I'm pregnant again." Ethan turned to her, eyes wide. "Again? Really, really? Are you surprised?" Pleasantly. He pulled her onto his lap, mindful of their watching children. "How do you feel?" "Tired already," Julia admitted. "But happy. So happy, Ethan. Our family keeps growing, the farm is doing well, we're surrounded by people who care about us." She touched his face. "You did this. You gave me all of this. We did it together, that's what makes it work." He kissed her softly. "I love you, Julia Sullivan, more today than yesterday, and I'll love you more tomorrow than today. That's quite a promise. One I intend to keep for the next 50 or 60 years." Julia laughed. "Only 50 or 60, fine, make it 100. I plan on loving you for 100 years. Now you're just being ridiculous. Maybe, but I'm your ridiculous husband, so you're stuck with me. I wouldn't have it any other way." Their 4th child, another boy named Henry, arrived in early 1876. The house was chaotic but full of love, exactly what they'd both dreamed of. One Sunday afternoon, after church and a big family meal, Julia's old friend Emma Morrison stopped by with her husband. Emma had been one of the witnesses who'd testified against Donovan, and she and Julia had remained close. "Your family is beautiful," Emma said, watching the children play. "You and Ethan have built something really special here. Thank you, we've been blessed." Julia poured coffee for everyone. "How are things at your place?" "Good, really good now that we don't have Donovan breathing down our necks." Emma smiled. "You know, people in town still talk about what you two did. You're heroes." Julia shook her head. "We just did what needed to be done. That's what makes you heroes. You stood up when no one else would." Emma touched Julia's hand. "You gave us all hope. Showed us that one person or 2 people working together can make a difference." Later, after Emma and her husband had left, Ethan found Julia standing at the fence watching the sunset. "You okay?" he asked, slipping his arm around her waist. "More than okay. I was just thinking about what Emma said about giving people hope." She leaned into him. "When my father died, I felt so hopeless, like the world was dark and nothing good would ever happen again. And now look at us. Look at what we've built." "We found light in the darkness," Ethan said. "Together." "Together," Julia agreed. "That's the secret, isn't it? 2 people working as a team, believing in each other. We're stronger together than we ever could be apart." "You needed someone to believe in," Ethan reminded her, echoing the words they'd spoken years ago. "And I found you. The most trustworthy, honorable, loving man I've ever known." She turned in his arms to face him. "And you needed someone to trust, and I found you." The strongest, bravest, most amazing woman in the world. He kissed her gently. We found everything we needed in each other. Everything and more. Julia rested her head against his chest, listening to his heartbeat. I love our life, Ethan. Every chaotic, exhausting, beautiful moment of it. Me too. Though I could do with a little less chaos occasionally, she laughed. With 4 children, good luck with that. Fair point. They stood together as the sun sank below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. The sounds of their children playing drifted from the house, along with the familiar sounds of the farm settling in for the night. Horses nickering in the barn, chickens roosting, the wind rustling through the wheat fields. You know what I'm most proud of? Julia asked eventually. What? That we broke the cycle. Both of us came from pain and loss and betrayal. We had every reason to stay bitter and closed off. But we didn't. We chose to trust, to believe, to build something good. She looked up at him. And now our children are growing up in a home full of love and security. They'll never doubt that they're wanted, that they're cherished. That's the greatest gift we can give them, Ethan agreed. The knowledge that love is real and lasting, that family means something. Exactly. We're giving them what we didn't have, and what we found together. The years continued to pass, each one bringing new joys and challenges. The farm expanded, the horse breeding program became known throughout Missouri and beyond, and the Sullivan children grew strong and capable. Thomas, serious and studious, developed a gift for business and took over the financial side of the operation as he got older. Sarah became an accomplished rider and trainer, working alongside her mother with the horses. James charmed everyone he met and proved invaluable at dealing with buyers and negotiating prices. Henry, the youngest, showed an aptitude for veterinary medicine and studied under the town's doctor to learn how to care for sick and injured animals. Ethan and Julia watched their children flourish with pride and gratitude. They'd built not just a farm but a legacy, something that would outlast them and continue to grow. On their 10th wedding anniversary in 1878, Ethan took Julia into town and bought her a beautiful locket from the jeweler. Inside, he'd had the jeweler engrave together "We found both." Julia cried when she opened it, her fingers tracing the words. "It's perfect, absolutely perfect. I wanted you to have something that reminded you of where we started," Ethan explained. 2 broken people who found wholeness in each other. I don't need a reminder. I think about it every single day. She fastened the locket around her neck. But I'll treasure this always. That night, alone in their bedroom after the children were asleep, they made love with the practiced ease of longtime partners who knew each other's bodies as well as their own minds. Afterwards, Julia lay with her head on Ethan's chest, his fingers trailing through her hair. "Do you ever think about that day?" she asked quietly. "The day we met, all the time. It was the worst day of my life and the best day of my life, all rolled into one. Mine too. I'd been so angry for so long, so consumed with revenge and justice. And then this desperate man came running through the trees and I had to make a split-second decision." She propped herself up to look at him. "I'm so glad I helped you." "Me too. Best split-second decision ever made." He traced her face with his fingertips, still marveling that she was his after all these years. "I love you more now than I did when we married. Is that possible?" "It's definitely possible. I feel the same way." She kissed him softly. "You're my best friend, my partner, the father of my children, and the love of my life. How could I not love you more with each passing day? I spent years thinking I'd never have this. Never have a real home, a real family, someone who truly knew me and loved me anyway." His voice grew thick with emotion. "You gave me all of that and more. You gave me a reason to believe in goodness again. And you gave me hope when I had none. You showed me that not all men are corrupt or cruel, that there are still people worth believing in." She kissed him again. "We saved each other, Ethan. In every way two people can save each other." In 1880, Thomas married a sweet girl named Mary from a neighboring farm. Ethan and Julia threw them a big wedding, the whole county turning out to celebrate. Watching his son pledge his life to Mary, Ethan was overwhelmed with emotion. "He's so young," he whispered to Julia. "He's 23. We were 26 and 24 when we married, not that much older." Julia squeezed his hand. "And he loves her. You can see it in the way he looks at her." "I suppose. I just want him to be happy." "He will be. We raised him right, gave him a good example of what marriage should be." She leaned against Ethan. "He knows how to love because he saw us love each other." Thomas and Mary built a house on the far edge of the farm, and Mary proved to be a hard worker and a good match for Thomas's serious nature. Within a year, they announced they were expecting their first child. "We're going to be grandparents," Julia said, still stunned by the news. "How is that possible?" "We're not old enough to be grandparents," Ethan laughed. "We're almost 40, love. That's definitely old enough." "Don't remind me." But when Thomas and Mary's son, named Ethan Thomas Sullivan after his grandfather and father, arrived in 1882, Julia fell instantly in love. She spent hours with her grandson, teaching him about horses and telling him stories about his grandfather and how they'd met. "You're going to spoil him," Ethan teased, watching her cuddle the baby. "That's my right as a grandmother," Julia retorted, using Ethan's own words from years ago. More grandchildren followed as their other children married and started families of their own. Sarah married a banker from Independence, surprising everyone, and they settled in town. James married a rancher's daughter and started his own breeding operation on adjacent land. Henry, after completing his veterinary studies, married a teacher and opened a practice treating both farm animals and pets. The original farmhouse, once just Ethan and Julia and their young children, became the center of a sprawling family operation. Sunday dinners brought everyone together. 3 generations gathered around the expanded dining table, talking and laughing and sharing their lives. On one such Sunday in 1889, with the house full of noise and grandchildren running everywhere, Ethan pulled Julia aside for a quiet moment on the porch. "Can you believe this?" he asked, gesturing to the chaos visible through the windows. "All of this, from 2 people who had nothing." "We had each other," Julia corrected. "That was more than nothing, true. But look what we built from that foundation." He pulled her close. 21 years, Julia. 21 years of the best life I could imagine. "And many more to come," she said firmly. "We're not done yet, Ethan Sullivan." No, I still have plans for you," he grinned. "Is that so? That's so." She kissed him, not caring that their children and grandchildren could see. "I plan on loving you for another 21 years at least, maybe 40, maybe 60. I seem to recall someone saying I was being ridiculous when I said I'd love you for 100 years. That was before I knew how good those years would be." She rested her head against his chest. "I take it back. 100 years isn't nearly enough." They stood together watching the sunset as they had so many times before, comfortable in the silence and in each other's presence. Inside, their family laughed and talked, the sound of it warming them both. "You know what I'm most grateful for?" Ethan asked eventually. "What?" "That I ran toward those trees that day. That I didn't go left or right or anywhere else. That somehow, against all odds, I ran straight toward the person I needed most in the world." "Fate," Julia said simply. "You believe in fate now. I believe in us. In what we built together." She looked up at him. "I believe that we were meant to find each other, that everything we went through, all the pain and loss and betrayal, led us to that moment in the trees. And from that moment, We built this." She gestured to the house, the farm, the family visible through the windows. "This beautiful, imperfect, wonderful life. You needed someone to believe in," Ethan said softly, "and I found you. The most believable, trustworthy man I've ever known." Julia smiled. "And you needed someone to trust, and I found you. The only person I've ever trusted completely with everything I am." He kissed her forehead. "Together we found both, trust and belief and love and family and everything we never dared to hope for." "Together," Julia agreed, the word that had become their promise, their foundation, their truth. As the sun set over the Missouri prairie, painting the sky in brilliant colors, Ethan and Julia Sullivan held each other and watched their family through the window. 4 children grown and married, 8 grandchildren and counting. A successful farm that was their legacy and their gift to future generations. They'd started with nothing but pain and distrust, 2 wounded souls in a hard world. But they'd found each other in the darkness, and together they'd built something that would last long after they were gone. They'd found trust when neither believed it existed anymore. They'd found someone to believe in when the world seemed full of corruption and cruelty. And in finding those things in each other, they'd found love, the kind of deep, abiding love that transforms lives and creates miracles. Years later, when Ethan was 65 and Julia 64, they still took their evening walks together, moving a bit slower but no less devoted to each other. Their children ran the farm now, with grandchildren learning the business and even a few great-grandchildren starting to appear. One warm June evening in 1904, they sat on the porch watching the sun set, as they had thousands of times before. Julia's hair was white now, Ethan's too, and their faces bore the lines of years of laughter and hard work. But when they looked at each other, they saw the same people who'd met in those trees 36 years ago. "You ever regret it?" Julia asked suddenly. "Regret what?" "Trusting me that day, taking a chance on a strange woman with a rifle." Ethan took her hand, their fingers intertwining automatically after so many years. "Never, not for a single second. You're the best thing that ever happened to me, Julia Sullivan. Even with all the chaos, all the struggles. Especially with all of that, the struggles made us stronger. The chaos made life interesting." He brought her hand to his lips and kissed it gently. "I'd do it all again in a heartbeat, every single moment." Julia's eyes glistened with tears. "Me too. I'd save that irritating cowboy all over again." "Irritating? Well, you did get shot at and bring a whole lot of trouble into my life. You brought a rifle into mine. I'd say we're even." They laughed together, the sound of it carrying across the farm they'd built with their own hands and their shared determination. Their legacy stretched out before them in every direction. The expanded barns, the fields of wheat and corn, the horses in their paddocks, the houses their children had built nearby, the family they'd created together. "We did good," Julia said quietly. "We did great," Ethan corrected. "We took 2 broken lives and made them whole. We built something that will last for generations, together. Always together." As the sun set on another day, Ethan and Julia Sullivan sat side by side, holding hands, watching the world they'd built together. 2 people who'd lost everything had found each other at their lowest moments, and from that chance meeting had grown a love story for the ages. He'd needed someone to trust after years of betrayal and disappointment. She'd needed someone to believe in after losing her father and facing corruption alone. Together, they'd found both trust and belief, and so much more. They'd found love, family, purpose, and a future neither had dared to dream possible. Their story, born in desperation and violence on the streets of Independence, Missouri, had become a testament to the power of love, trust, and partnership. They'd proven that two people working together, believing in each other, trusting each other completely, could overcome any obstacle and build something beautiful from the ashes of their separate losses. And as they sat together in the golden light of the setting sun, surrounded by the evidence of their shared life, Ethan and Julia knew with absolute certainty that they'd found exactly what they'd needed in each other. Not just trust or belief, but a love that had sustained them through 36 years and would carry them through whatever years remained. Together, they'd found both. And together, they'd found everything.